ಗೋಖಲೆ ಸಾರ್ವಜನಿಕ ವಿಚಾರ ಸಂಸ್ಥೆ ಹಮ್ಮಿಕೊಂಡಿರುವ ಸಂವಿಧಾನ ಗಣರಾಜ್ಯ ವಜ್ರೋತ್ಸವ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮ ಸರಣಿಯ 3ನೇ ದಿನ ನಾವೆಲ್ಲ ಸೇರಿದ್ದೀವಿ. ಇವತ್ತಿನ ಉಪನ್ಯಾಸವನ್ನು ನಡೆಸಿಕೊಡೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಪ್ರೊಫೆಸರ್ RLM ಪಾಟೀಲ ಅವರು ಬಂದಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ನಮ್ಮ ಶ್ರೇಷ್ಠ ಚಿಂತಕರಲ್ಲೊಬ್ಬರು. ಬೆಂಗಳೂರು ವಿಶ್ವವಿದ್ಯಾಲಯದಲ್ಲಿ ರಾಜ್ಯಶಾಸ್ತ್ರ ಪೊಲಿಟಿಕಲ್ ಸೈನ್ಸ್ ವಿಭಾಗದ ಪ್ರಾಧ್ಯಾಪಕರಾಗಿ ಅಧ್ಯಕ್ಷರಾಗಿ ಸೇವೆ ಸಲ್ಲಿಸಿ ನಿವೃತ್ತರಾಗಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ನಮ್ಮ ವೇದಿಕೆಗೆ ಸುಪರಿಚಿತರೇ ಆಗಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಅನೇಕ ಸಂದರ್ಭಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಬಂದಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಕಳೆದ ವರ್ಷ ಗೋಖಲೆ ಜನ್ಮದಿನೋಪನ್ಯಾಸ ಕೂಡ ಇವರಿಂದಲೇ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಆಗಿತ್ತು. ಅವರಿಗೆ ತಮ್ಮೆಲ್ಲರ ಪರವಾಗಿ ಆತ್ಮೀಯ ಸ್ವಾಗತ ಕೋರ್ತೇನೆ. ಇವತ್ತಿನ ವಿಷಯ ನಮ್ಮ ಸಂವಿಧಾನದ ರಚನೆಯ ಭೂಮಿಕೆ ಮತ್ತು ಹಿನ್ನೆಲೆ. ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ ರಾಜೇಂದ್ರ ಪ್ರಸಾದರ ಅಧ್ಯಕ್ಷತೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಹತ್ತಿರ 3 ವರ್ಷಗಳ ಪರಿಶ್ರಮ ಸಂವಿಧಾನದ ರಚನೆಗೆ ಹಿಡಿದಿತ್ತು. ಮೊದಲು ಸಿದ್ಧವಾದ ಕರಡಿಗೆ 7600ರಷ್ಟು ತಿದ್ದುಪಡಿಗಳು ಸೂಚಿತವಾಗಿದ್ದವು. ಸುಮಾರು 3 ಸುತ್ತುಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಆ ಕರಡಿನ ಮರುವಿಮರ್ಶೆ ನಡೆಯಿತು. ಅಂತಿಮವಾಗಿ 1949 ನವೆಂಬರ್ 26ಕ್ಕೆ ಅದು ಅಂಗೀಕಾರ ಪಡೆಯಿತು. ಸಂವಿಧಾನದ ಎಷ್ಟೋ ಪ್ರಮುಖ ಅಂಶಗಳ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಈಗಲೂ ಕೂಡ ಐಕಮತ್ಯ ಇದೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳುವ ಸ್ಥಿತಿ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಡ್ರಾಫ್ಟಿಂಗ್ ಕಮಿಟಿಯ ಸದಸ್ಯರಾಗಿದ್ದ ಸಾದುಲ್ಲಾ ಅವರೇ ಅಂತಿಮ ಹಂತದಲ್ಲಿ ಹೇಳಿದರು, ಕರಡು ರಚನಾ ಸಮಿತಿ ಸಂಪೂರ್ಣ ಸ್ವತಂತ್ರವಾಗಿ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡೋ ಸನ್ನಿವೇಶ ಇರಲಿಲ್ಲ. ಪ್ರಜಾಪ್ರಭುತ್ವ ತತ್ವಕ್ಕೆ ಅನುಗುಣವಲ್ಲದ ಎಷ್ಟೋ ಅಂಶಗಳನ್ನು ಸೇರಿಸಬೇಕಾಯಿತು. ಏನೇನೋ ತೀವ್ರ ಒತ್ತಡಗಳು ಇದ್ದವು ಅಂತ ಸಾದುಲ್ಲಾ ಅವರೇ ಹೇಳಿದ್ದುಂಟು. ಸಂವಿಧಾನ ರಚನೆಯ ಪ್ರಕ್ರಿಯೆ ಹೇಗೆ ನಡೆಯಿತು ಅನ್ನುವ ವಿಶ್ಲೇಷಣೆಯನ್ನು ನೀಡಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಪ್ರೊಫೆಸರ್ ಪಾಟೀಲ್ ಅವರನ್ನು ಪ್ರಾರ್ಥನೆ ಮಾಡ್ತೇನೆ.
ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ. ಶ್ರೀಮಾನ್ ರಾಮಸ್ವಾಮಿಗಳು ನನ್ನ ಬಿಗ್ ಬ್ರದರ್ ನಮೂನೆ ಭಾಳ ಪ್ರಶಂಸೆ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ನಾನು ಅರ್ಹನಲ್ಲ. ಅವ್ರ ದೊಡ್ಡ ಹೃದಯ ಕಾರಣ. ಐ ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಬಿನ್ ಎ ಪ್ರೊಫೆಷನಲ್ ಟೀಚರ್, ರಿಸರ್ಚರ್, ಪಬ್ಲಿಸಿಸ್ಟ್. ಐ ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ದ ಟೀಚಿಂಗ್ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪೀರಿಯನ್ಸ್ ಆಫ್ ಮೋರ್ ದ್ಯಾನ್ 35 years in the departments of political science in different universities. I did my doctoral work in Jawaharlal Nehru University in international relations field, then taught in Delhi University political science, then Madras University, then Bengaluru. From out of this experience, whenever I have taught this course, Indian Constitution, Government and Politics, I had to make some study. Though I come from international relations field, I did develop interest in Indian Constitution precisely because both international relations and Indian Constitution, they have something common from my point of view, and that is how do disputes, conflicts get resolved. Whether these disputes or conflicts are international or intranational, intra-society, the methodology would be the same. The factors which bring about conflict may be the same. Personality clashes, ego clashes, ideological conflicts may be the same. So I thought, let me apply my insight developed from international relations to understand Indian Constitution and its working. And sometimes I peeped into history of making the Constitution of India. When I was a student doing my BA or MA, my teachers also told me it's a wonderful constitution, great constitution, long constitution, a mirror of the best constitutions of the world everywhere. It was made by Baba Saheb Ambedkar. Everything I had gulped. But when I brought a little critical attitude towards understanding. I was a little puzzled. I had occasion to study American Constitution also, which I had to teach sometime. Then when I went to the basics of making of the US Constitution, I was wonderstruck. Whatever we were told about American Constitution, that also was a little pilloried in scholarly works. The people who made the American Constitution, they were countryside politicians, most of them. They had their own local interests, and they were proud people also, and they were business class people. And compromises had to be thrashed out in order to make them agree to one text of the Constitution. And there are famous 2.5 compromises. One of them dealt with counting the slaves population. Somebody wanted to count them as 1, somebody else wanted to count them as 2. So ultimately they said half, will count every slave as a half a man or half a woman. If you did not agree to that, the Constitution would not have come out. Like this they have made important, significant compromises. Without compromises, no Constitution could be drawn up. When I studied French Constitution, the same thing came up. You had to compromise and give up some fundamental posturing. And then when I studied the Indian Constitution from the same perspective, I was relieved that in India also we have done the similar things. Sorry, thank you. Thank you. And then recently, I did make fresh study of the making of the Indian Constitution from only one point of view, the politics of it. Forget about the nobility, grandeur. Okay, we will pay our obeisance, respect to the Constitution. I hold it in high esteem. I take oath under the Constitution, defend, protect, whatever. That happens. That has to happen. But as a student, as an academician, I would like to study the making of the Constitution strictly from the point of view of conflicts, confusions, and contradictions, which are bound to occur whenever you want to draft a constitution, be it American, be it French, be it Indian, be it Pakistani or Chinese. If we ignore that, we will be doing injustice. Number one, we will be half informed about the Constitution. Constitution is both a legal document and also a political document. It cannot be just one. You would be surprised to know, at least some of you who are above 70 years may know, but those who are a little less, around 50, you may not know much, that when the Constitution had to be drafted, 46, 47, 48, 49, there was a Constituent Assembly, the members of which were elected by the provincial legislatures, or the members of the provincial legislatures, who were elected in 1945 July to December, soon after the Second World War. Therefore, it was an indirect election from the provincial legislators, and these provincial legislators also were elected on the basis of a limited franchise. 28.5% of the population was eligible to vote, of whom maybe 10-15% might have voted. So it was based upon limited franchise and indirect election. This was against the constitution, against the principle of Congress party's resolutions. They wanted direct election on the basis of universal suffrage, whatever. But now they accepted this because implementing their old resolutions and their demands would have taken 2 to 3 years more time. So they cut it short and accepted Constituent Assembly's composition as it was. And just before the starting of the deliberations of the Constituent Assembly, the Muslim League, which had got about 73 members on its own ticket, Muslim League ticket, they were instructed to boycott the deliberations of the Constituent Assembly by their leader, Mr. Muhammad Ali Jinnah. And somebody said they will break the leg of those who would like to attend still. So effectively, Muslim League boycotted. They wanted to have their own constitution for Pakistan. They would have nothing to do with undivided India and constitution making for India as such. So this is just an historical development of ordinary interest to many people. But to me, who ask a question, what was the composition of the Constituent Assembly which produced this constitution of ours? The reply is, the figures are here, Total seats were 389 of the Constituent Assembly, of which elected members were 296, and the princely states nominations came to 93. So together 389. And most of the princely states didn't send their nominees because they didn't believe in Congress-led constitution in which princes would not be given proper importance, and they would impose Congress constitution. Therefore, many princes didn't send, and even those nominees didn't take their seats. And Muslim League boycotted. Therefore, the result was, of the 296 elected, 205 were Congress members. And when Muslim League boycotted, some of the princes boycotted, the remaining effective or working strength of the Constituent Assembly was only 162. Sometimes some figures give it as 163. Doesn't matter. But who were these 162? You would be surprised to know, out of the 160, 61, 62, 120 or 121 were Congress members, which comes to how much? 69 or 70%. And then some people didn't take part, and some people died also. Ultimately, the people who signed the constitution document, only 211, sometimes they attended, some didn't attend. Out of the 211 working members, 161 took part. And then the percentage of the Congress members in the Constituent Assembly went up to 89. So 89% of the representatives who made the constitution for India, they were congressmen. And the remaining, they were not anti-Congress either. They were sympathizers. Some of them had got elected on the basis of Congress support. There were 3 or 4 incorrigible individualistic opponents like H.V. Kamath, or 3, 4 more. And one of them was a respected great gentleman, Kunzru. They would not oppose the Congress, some such people. And even H.V. Kamath, with all criticism, he would endorse ultimately. But then minus these 3 or 4, 5 people, the remaining were all congressmen or Congress sympathizers. Now, is it not important characteristic of the Constituent Assembly? Granville Austin, an American scholar who came to India and studied the files which are treated as confidential even now. I cannot be shown the file. They are all treated ultra confidential. What could be ultra confidential about making the constitution in 1946, 47, 48, 49? I fail to understand. But this gentleman scholar, some people say he was also CIA agent later on. It's a good thing. CIA had good brains to pick up a scholar and send him and make him study Indian constitution, because the results would be absorbed by policymakers of America who played dominant role in making the constitution, their respective contributions, etc. And this is scholarly work that he has brought out, in which he says on page number 2 and on page number 8 and 9, twice he says, and I'm quoting Professor Granville Austin, he says, at that time in India, when the constitution was framed, Congress was the Federal Assembly, Congress was the Constituent Assembly, Congress was the government. And this was a country, I'm quoting him still, this was the country of one party. That was the Congress party. Now we can infer some conclusions from this. When I give you figures, 69 to 89% of the representatives or members of the Constituent Assembly belong to one party, and that one party dominated all the political stages, forums. And not only that, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patil was such a strong man, disciplinarian, that Congress people did not express dissent, those days at least. They were disciplined soldiers, really. So they might say something, but then they will fall in line. next morning and carry out the whip given to them by the Congress. Need not be given in writing. Just what Sardar says, rumor is good enough, whispering is good enough, they will fall in line. So Sardar Patel's control over the Congress party ensured that there was a total support or endorsement of whatever the Congress High Command decided. And the Congress High Command, jocularly they say, represented by 2.5 people. Nehru, Patel, and the other half, I leave it to your imagination. It may be Rajendra Prasad, it may be Maulana Azad. So, 2.5 people decide, and the rest, 89% of the Constituent Assembly members will endorse. And debate will be conducted because it is a forum in which you have to take decision. Committees have studied the matter and prepared detailed reports. There were 13 committees, and they were doing the bidding of either Nehruji or Sardarji, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, and Ambedkar Sahib and others supervised the finishing of those things, documents, and Constituent Assembly debated, discussed, and passed the draft. Many textbook writers, famous ones, not famous ones, all of them recalled this fact that Constituent Assembly spent 3 years working hard on preparing the text. Exactly they say 2 years, 11 months, 18 days. And the total comes to something like 1080 days or so. So look, the Americans produced their constitution in 6 months' time. But our founding fathers labored hard for 1080 days or more. So you are impressed. They count the day from December 6th when it was inaugurated, December 6, 1946, and the concluding day, 29 February 1949. And within these three, you have 1080 or 1100 days. But then, like our present Lok Sabha, they didn't sit on Saturdays and Sundays and holidays, and then there were months of gaps. If you take their sitting days, working days, it comes to 145 days, not 1100 days. Working day, session-wise, if you take into account, the Constitution was the product of the labor of 145 days and no more. Secondly, very important, please don't feel offended if I bring out facts. They are facts. Nobody wanted to make a new constitution for India at that point of time. It's our own imagination that these people labored hard. No. Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, addressing Scheduled Caste Federation in April 1946, declared, we don't want a new constitution for independent India. The 1935 constitution is the best that we have got. And in his book, State and Minorities, he wrote that if a new constitution were to be written, it will be influenced by the dominant castes and other considerations, antithetical to the interests of the oppressed classes. I don't want a new constitution drafted. I want 1935 constitution with the necessary modifications here and there. Quote and unquote, Babasaheb Ambedkar. And it seems that the drafting committee, when it requested Dr. Babasaheb to accept chairmanship of the drafting committee, there was an understanding between the chairman and the Constituent Assembly that 1935 constitution would work as the basis of the new constitution. And this suited Babasaheb, otherwise he would not have accepted the position. Number two, already Sardar Patel, Jawaharlal Nehru, and other ministers of importance, they were in office. They held the ministerial portfolio, prime ministerial, deputy prime ministerial, and other ministerial portfolios they held from 1946 September. So when the constitution was drafted and adopted finally 49, they were already 3 years old in office. They had enjoyed that office, and they didn't want to give up an iota of power of those offices which they held and they were used to. They would say, when I am there, why you want to write something? Country's interests are safe and I have run the government. So just formalize whatever we are doing. And this is what bureaucratically is acceptable. Bureaucrat would be very happy. He doesn't want any change. And Jawaharlal Nehru himself went on record, and when K.T. Shah wanted some amendments, why follow British model, why not presidential American? Somebody suggested in the constitution, why not Swiss model? Nehru got up and said, don't disturb the design of the constitution we have agreed on already. Don't disturb. It's a well-designed constitution, we have worked it, and why do you get up and make all sorts of suggestions like we people do in seminars? He didn't want that. No disturbance. Keep it going as it is. So, on the one hand, Baba Sahib wanted not major changes, not a de novo constitution. On the other hand, those people who were ensconced in office for the last 3 years and they had developed an admiration and they were relishing the portfolios and offices and privileges, and they had got mentally attuned to the British Westminster model. They had grown up in that atmosphere and they didn't want to be disturbed or powers taken away from them and something new taking place. They didn't like it. This is second one. Third important factor, which is also factual, historical, is that it would be a stupid man, an idiot, perfect, if one were to take out pen and paper and start drafting the constitution afresh in Delhi in 1947, when there were lakhs and lakhs of Hindus being butchered by Muslims and Muslims butchered by Hindus, and lakhs of people coming from West Pakistan shouting for locating their kith and kin, and they had no food, they had no water, the families were separated, they had no shelter, no assurance, no security. In fact, in Vittalbhai Patil house where these people met for constitutional deliberations, they could hear, they have recorded members, they could hear from the windows, "Bachao, bachao, bachao." And the whole country was a little jittery. Not only in New Delhi, where refugees descended in lakhs, in Kerala, the Maharaja, under the great sagacious advice of C.P. Ramaswamy Iyer, said, I have no power to join Indian Union. Lord Padmanabha dictates that I shall be independent. And Hyderabad Nizam had already applied for membership of the General Assembly of the United Nations as an independent country, and Britain had supported his application. And there were other signs. As though this was not enough. You are all familiar with the Kashmir war. It started in October 1947. Now, would it not be idiotic to say, I ignore all the developments, I am a poet like, and I will draft a new, fresh constitution, or I will write an epic in the name of Constitution of India? It would look awkward, out of place, odd thing. Nobody wanted, nobody was in the mood to write, and it would not have been in the fitness of things if they started for A, B, C, D, etc., language problem, caste problem, whatever else, and distribution of power, office. It would have been a mad crowd. Therefore, for all these three important reasons, they preferred implementing 1935 constitution, which of course was a good constitution. It was the product of British pragmatism. Joint committee of the British Parliament had come here, met various political leaders and parties, intellectuals, and prepared it with great wisdom, distilled wisdom, and it was a very likable constitution. If it was implemented in the other aspect also, federal aspects of it, should have been wonderful, and not only that, it would have prevented the partition of the country, more importantly. And it would have helped the provinces to become strong, comparatively speaking. States would have become important, and center would have confined itself to 3-4 core issues, and it would have worked wonders. So Baba Sahib Ambedkar was right. It was a good constitution, and they didn't need to write a new constitution. But then that was not the only reason. The other reasons were these historical circumstances, and they're getting used to being enamored of the British Westminster model and not wanting to be disturbed, thrown out of place. So all this combined, and the first fact that I brought to your notice, 89% of the Constituent Assembly members belong to one party, and that one party had a high command of 2.5 people, leaders, and it was well drilled assembly. So everything went off smoothly. So they adopted the constitution without much murmur or protest. It was more or less a command performance, though it's a bad word, bad phrase. But everything was in order. And this we call a fine constitution document and praise it. No, that looks a little dramatic. It is not so. There were some other motivating factors and they should be taken into account. This is one way of understanding the drafting of the constitution, making the constitution. Another way is there. Jawaharlal Nehru himself, and I don't know how far Baba Saheb was willing to accept that, but Baba Saheb also might have liked it. They wanted to have the best of the British constitution, the Westminster system of governance, as well as the American system of governance. This is like combining the two non-combinable elements like aluminum and iron. Both are good metals, but can you make an alloy of aluminum with iron? Try it. It's not possible. British model is good. Follow it if you want. American model is also good. Follow it if you want. But why you want to travel or move in two boats, the Westminster and American? There are some glaring contradictions between the two systems of governance in London and Washington. You have heard of this phrase, parliamentary supremacy of the Westminster model, where Parliament is all in all. Parliament makes law, Parliament committee called Cabinet or Council of Ministers, which actually is part of the Parliament, which is entrusted with the job of execution of those laws. And the interpretation also, highest appeal, Court of Appeal is House of Lords, which is part of the Parliament. And now, of course, 2 months ago, they have done away with this and they have started a Supreme Court in England for the last 2 months. It was a good riddance in a way of the old House of Lords that's gone. But at that point of time when we made our constitution, House of Lords was there. So in Parliament of England, you have all the three functions vested in one institution: lawmaking, law execution through the Council of Ministers, a part of the committee of the Parliament, and law interpretation at the highest level. All the three were combined, and the king also was not outside the Parliament. In England, law is made by king in Parliament with the two hyphens, king hyphen in hyphen Parliament. King in Parliament makes a law. And we, in Article 79 of the Constitution, we say President is the first component of Parliament ourselves. So this is the way we have copied the British Westminster model. The Parliament of India consists of first President of India, then Rajya Sabha, then Lok Sabha. This is how we have written our constitution. If you got up and asked somebody in the Constituent Assembly at that time, sir, why do you bring President in the Parliament? Baba Saheb would reply, but that is so in England. King is part of the Parliament. So we have to have President as part of the Parliament. So, okay, I accept that this is the British evolution, British consistent pattern, and Parliament in England is supreme. There is no court which can set aside Parliamentary Act, and no direction can be given to Parliament from anybody, king or somebody. So Parliament is all in all. As some great writer, famous writer said, Parliament in England can do anything except converting man into woman or woman into man. Now, in our country, that is not necessary. All of them are converted into third gender. So it doesn't matter. Now, that is Westminster model. No quarrel with that. But unfortunately for us, England is a small country with unitary government. Only one government functioning from London. There you run into trouble. What should be the image of the state governments? Chief Minister, Council of Ministers and Governor at the state level. Because this is not there in England. Then rather unthinkingly, our constitution makers, great as they were, intelligent as they were, they didn't apply their minds. As President here, so Governor there. As Prime Minister here, so Chief Minister there. As Parliament here, so the Assembly there. Okay. If you want to do it in a simple manner, do it. But then that was not done. They didn't want to have a clear-cut division or share of power on an equal footing between the central government and the state governments. Here comes a high command diktat. How can provincial chief ministers, it may be Rajaji, it may be Kher, or it may be Bidhan Chandra Roy, anybody, you give them equal status, you give them free hand to run their governments as they like. That's horrible. You can't accept that. Therefore, what they did was make the governments of the states subordinate to the will and wish of the central government in Delhi. Now, this is not there in England. It is there in America, they said. America, when in October 1949, our dear Prime Minister went on first visit to America, he was invited to address the Senate, yes, customary honor. And then he told the senators in the US in October 49, we are modeling our constitution upon yours. We are adopting your federal features. And the point of time is very important. In 49 October only, this was adopted, passed in the Constituent Assembly. But then, was Nehru such a dullard that he did not know the federal features of the American government or American Constitution? In America, 50 states are entities by themselves, indestructible entities. The central government or federal government or the President of America cannot dismiss any governor of any state, cannot dismiss the state ministries, cannot dissolve any state assemblies. Did you not know that? Did not Ambedkar Sahib know that? He was law professor. He was student in American universities. Did you not know that in America, federalism is such that central government has no hold on state governments? Each state has its own constitution. That much he should have known. And here, you have introduced precedence rule, whereby you can dismiss the governor, not only governor, government, chief ministers, and dissolve the assembly and impose central government rule on the states. One by one you can take over. That doesn't happen in American Constitution. And you cannot split a state, 1 into 2 or 1 into 3, nor can you merge the states. But you have the power here. Our Constitution says Parliament of India has the power to create as many states or to merge as many states as it wants. And it is not an amendment to the Constitution. It is only a parliamentary bill. 51% votes of the present voting, that will decide. Is that there in America? Was our Prime Minister right on facts when he told the honorable Senate members that we are modeling our system after yours? We are adopting federal features from your Constitution. No, perfectly wrong. We did that. Along with the federal features that we wanted but copied very badly, or we had our own concept of federalism, probably our federal notion was as it used to be during the British Raj, British government. All the provinces headed by governors, British governors, were subordinate to the central government, whether it was in Calcutta or Delhi. They were not equals. The relationship was between that of master and servant. They were subordinated to the central government. And further, as I said, we can make and unmake territories of states, names of states, boundaries of states by wish of the parliament. If the parliament is controlled by Congress or BJP or SP or some other party, they can decide the fate. Telangana is a problem because of that also. I am not going into that question though. So it is neither like American federal system, nor is it like the British system where you have no federalism. Of course, one Professor King has come out with a book and saying in England also there is federalism because there are municipal corporations sharing power. So that's just for argument's sake. There is no comparison at all. Then what is our federalism about? What is it like? It was perfectly carrying forward the old British model of administration in India. It is properly called, and the technically correct word used in this context is, it is devolution of authority. Devolution is what I give to some subordinate. I can always take it back if I want. And if you study Morley-Minto reforms onwards, this word is used, devolution of power. Yes, even now in the Constitution of India, there is a devolution of power from the union to the states. It's not a sharing of power between, on the one hand, states, and on the other hand, central, as it is done in America. It is not like that. And they misled our country. Even now, we are allowing ourselves to be misled. And another source of conflict in the Constitution is, in America they have evolved, rightly or wrongly. It is not there in the Constitution of America for certain, but then Chief Justice Marshall, who was a political animal, nominated to Supreme Court, and he couldn't get minister's post. He was sulking, and then he was made judge, and then he became Chief Justice. And in one particular case, McCulloch versus Madison, he twisted the logic and arguments and saved his skin, otherwise he would have been impeached. There were threats. And he wrote out a judgment to suit the whim and fancy of Mr. Madison. And that judgment is described as a celebrated judgment, first documented judgment in which supremacy of the Supreme Court is upheld, because it pronounced that constitutional act which gave certain power to Madison was wrong, because Constitution does not give this power to the Congress. Therefore, Congress had passed an act giving certain powers to the executive which was beyond its pale of jurisdiction. Therefore, Congress was wrong. The act was wrong, not Madison. So, this was hailed not as a skin-saving device judgment, but upholding the supremacy of the Supreme Court, which could review the validity or otherwise of an act passed by the Congress. Therefore, that establishes in our records of American Constitution the supremacy of the judiciary in America. And up till now, people have got used to that. People have liked it and developed it further, strengthened it further, and it is a solid fact, unquestionable, unimpeachable fact, that today in America for the last 200 years, you have what is called supremacy of the Supreme Court or judiciary in America. That's a great contribution of American polity, American Constitution. Hats off to that tradition, okay. But of course it was founded in sin. That is a separate argument. Founded in sin or otherwise, it has become an inseparable, unquestionable fact of constitutional history of America. Now, that is what I was saying about supremacy of the Supreme Court. I did it deliberately because earlier, a while ago, I said in England, you have supremacy of the Parliament. Does it take a lot of intelligence for anybody to see the conflict between the two concepts, supremacy of the judiciary on the one hand and supremacy of the Parliament on the other hand? But in our Constitution, the great, noble, learned people have combined both of them, like iron and aluminium. Judicial supremacy is there, Article 32, etc. And parliamentary supremacy also there. It can amend the Constitution. And Jawaharlal Nehru, the Prime Minister, and President Rajendra Prasad, and Baba Saheb, of course, and everybody else has always said that we have followed Westminster model. Westminster model means Parliament is supreme. Then why did you write Article 32, which says Supreme Court has the power to review? The two can't go together. You can't give sovereignty to two institutions at the same time. And that is some confusion. Either they didn't understand what they were doing or they didn't care. कौन पूछता है? कौन है पूछने वाला? People keep quiet. And then it is approved. Like that you have fundamental rights borrowed from England or concept of England. Where you have Bill of Rights or Magna Carta and celebrated fundamental rights enjoyed by the British citizens in Britain. And Motilal Nehru Committee had listed the fundamental rights that Indians must have, like they have in England for the British citizens or Englishmen. And then you have directive principles of state policy, which sound either Gandhian foibles or Gandhian whatever you might say, principles or Gandhian liking on in one set, in one bundle, and in another group or in another bundle, you have socialistic package. Somebody, maybe Tayyabji or somebody else, a smart guy, might have told Jawaharlal Nehru he was not happy with Gandhian elements in the Constituent Assembly, who wanted Khadar, prohibition, cow worship or prevention of cow slaughter, so on and so forth, Gram Panchayat. And these were all Gandhi's fads and foibles, which Nehru could not put up with. He had made it clear in writing. But then, most of the Constituent Assembly members were Gandhi's followers, admirers, soldiers. Now, being clever, being pragmatic, Nehru thought that, in fact, when was that? 20th or so, January 1948. Gandhi comes to Delhi for the first time after independence. It's a very sad story, but then anyway, in 1947, on August 15th, when our noble leader hoisted the flag, national flag, unfurled the flag on the ramparts of the Red Fort, Gandhiji was nowhere in Delhi. Nobody remembered the father of the nation. He was doomed. And in fact, Jawaharlal Nehru asked Sardar Patel, where is Bapu? And Sardar Patel says, I also have no information. Then some smart chap says, why not ask our intelligence guys to locate him wherever he is? And they locate him in Gokhale. And they ask him, come, we'll celebrate. And then he says, I am not happy. India has not got the freedom that I wanted. You do whatever you want. I will not come to Delhi. I have no mission in Delhi. My mission is here, nursing the wounded in communal riots. So I said, okay, Baba, you attend to your duty, we will do ours. And then Mountbatten wanted Gandhi. And then he came around 20th or so, or 27th or so. Mountbatten said, I will send the aircraft to lift you from Patna to Delhi. He said, I will travel third class train only, I will not come by your plane. He came. And then Mountbatten invited him to come and stay in his imperial lodging. Then Gandhi said, I will stay in Bhangi colony, which is now called Sevanagar, adjacent to Lodi colony. So he stayed in Bhangi colony. And these people who were prime ministers, ministers, deputy prime ministers, law ministers, they felt a little embarrassed that they had to go to Bhangi colony and call on Bapu. But they still went. And one after another, like school kids giving report of their examination records, they read out Bapuji, who have incorporated fundamental rights, Bapu, who have given federal structure, Bapu, who have done this and that. And Bapu heard and then sternly asked them, what have you done about Gram Panchayats? What have you done about Khadi? What about cow slaughter, prohibition? Get lost. All of you get out. Then they said, in troop, they had gone, they said, Bapu, we will do that and come back to you. He said, don't come back, get out. He threw them out. This is a fact. And after all, you are a student of constitution making. Now Gandhi said, there's nothing in it for me. And then these people willy-nilly incorporated Gandhian ideas, which Nehru did not want. So some smart chap, ICS chap, might have told Jawaharlal, sir, don't bother, you put them in a box. Say non-judiciable. Direct to principles of state policy. So this is a harmless appendix. Whatever you don't like, sir, put them there. It was done. And also, Jawaharlal Nehru wanted socialism. So how long I should go? Half an hour more? And the Constituent Assembly would not have endorsed socialism or secularism. They were not in favor of that. Therefore, Nehru thought that instead of having a confrontation with the majority of the members on these issues, drop them. So they were also put in the non-judiciable chapter. So this is how the constitution is made in India. And many other issues I can take up. Is this really a Westminster model of governance? We have written so many details, 395 articles and 9 or 10 schedules they wrote could they not write one small phrase, parliamentary democracy? This is missing. Sovereign democratic republic they wrote. They didn't write anywhere parliamentary system. Even now, if you give it to me, I'll prove that we have got a presidential system of government. There shall be president. He shall have like servants, cabinet ministers, who shall render advice to him, aid and advice. Not binding, aid and advice they give, but you can, suppose for a while, imagine, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru was elected President of India. And some Ram Subhag Singh or some Ramaswamy or no, sorry sir, not your name, just like that. Some UP wala Bihari or somebody unknown person or little known person was appointed Prime Minister, like Sardar Hukum Singh being Prime Minister and Indira Gandhi being President. The Constitution is not violated anywhere, and the President shall rule. Council of Ministers headed by the Prime Minister shall aid and advise the President in the discharge of his functions, as it was done in Sri Lanka case. Janavardhane was President, and precisely this was the arrangement. President would take decisions, but if anything went wrong, the Prime Minister or the Minister concerned in the department, he has to resign, not the President. So we have followed, we say, or these great worthy people said, Westminster model, but what prevented them from saying so openly, writing half a sentence, British parliamentary or parliamentary system? They have not done it. So, President of India has been given some powers. It's very surprising. Articles 85, 86, 103, 217. I have no time, I will not read them. These give discretionary powers to the President. And these powers have to be used only by him, not on the advice of the Council of Ministers. Very specific, like disqualification of MPs. On the recommendation of the Chief Election Commissioner, President of India shall take a decision on disqualifying MPs. Now he has this means, Chief Election Commissioner here, on determination of the age of judges, because judges are also capable of manufacturing their date of birth certificates, update it. So on the recommendation of the Chief Justice of India, the President shall decide, make the decision. So Prime Minister is ousted from these. And like that, summoning the Parliament without allowing more than 6 months time to lapse. President of India shall convene. And he has to see that 6 months more time is not elapsed. So there are several provisions which give the impression that President of India has other sources of advice to him, not only the Council of Ministers. And suppose the Prime Minister is dead or in coma or resigned and nobody else is appointed, what to do? So there are some situations. Besides this, I will tell you something interesting once again. When Jawaharlal Nehru was on his first official visit to the United States, as I mentioned, October 49, it's very remarkable. Baba Saheb Ambedkar introduces amendments to the draft constitution. It was already finalized, more or less. To that finalized draft, now the chief of the drafting committee moves an amendment and says there shall be instrument of instruction to the President and to the Governor to carry out their to carry out the powers given to them under discretion. Instrument of instruction plus an board of appointment for appointing members of the Election Commission or UPSC or judges of the Supreme Court, High Court. These were there contemplated in an earlier constitution. And he made an eloquent speech. He was a professor, convinced everybody, and the Constituent Assembly passed those amendments. And you had in place to the President and to the Governors instrument of instructions. Based upon that, the President of India will take decisions, and these instrument of instructions related to federal matters like imposition of President's rule or interfering in state affairs. So this was done. Board of appointment was given by way of amending the existing draft constitution. and Pandit Ji, the moving spirit behind the constitution making, was in America. And comes back the Indian Prime Minister, and in weeks' time or so, Baba Saheb Ambedkar moves one more amendment to withdraw those amendments. The board of appointment is withdrawn, instrument of instructions is withdrawn. Again, make an eloquent, more eloquent speech, why they should not be there. And Constituent Assembly, like a flock of sheep, says, okay, fine. What happened in between? That's an interesting question. This gentleman from America, scholar, he refers to the files in which this correspondence is maintained between Pandit Ji and Baba Saheb, but he doesn't spell out what happened. Probably it is still confidential what happened. And it would have been an ideal situation if President of India were to be advised not by the Prime Minister of Congress Party or BJP or Samajwadi Party, but by an independent committee or commission giving instructions. So he would get advice from them. Who should be appointed judge of the Supreme Court? Dinakaran or somebody else? Not Prime Minister of Congress Party of the time ruling, or any other party, not Congress alone, any party ruling. They have vested interest in that. So why not have an independent-minded board for appointments, or independent-minded ex-bureaucrats or judges or some eminent statesmen or retired presidents or governors, and seek their advice on instructions on issues touching federal matters. Why not? In fact, I would advocate introduce it. It's high time. Review the constitution. But when Panditji returned, he was furious, and the chief draftsman moved another amendment and withdrew those things. And this was done in, I think, October 1949. And in November, constitution was adopted. So one of the last acts of the Constituent Assembly was to repeal what was a golden opportunity. And in fact, M.C. Settlewad in 1967 April in Chennai gave the opening endowment lecture in the name of C.P. Ramaswamy Iyer. And in that lecture he begins by saying that I distinctly remember, I am quoting Settlewad, I distinctly remember Sir B.N. Rao telling me that original draft of the constitution contained a provision which asked for periodic revision of the constitution. And Settlewad says, I don't know where it got lost. So there are many, whatever you might call dark spots or hidden spaces, unexplored documents. That American fellow, Granville Austin, knows what has happened, but he is not free to tell us. And I am not anybody to go and have access to those files. Pray, what is so confidential, strategic, or importance of the state that you should not show the files of correspondence between Ambedkar and Prasad and Nehru and Ambedkar in 45, 46, 47, 48? What is that great secret? I don't understand. So anyway, gentlemen, there are many such points that one can make, and objectively and academically. I have no grudge against anyone of those names I mentioned. But then it looks as though we have not studied this aspect, how the constitution was made. And it dissatisfies me. They had an opportunity to clarify things, lay down our basic or fundamental positions, make them very clear. They are not made. In this context, a conversation between Napoleon Bonaparte and his right-hand diplomat advisor Talleyrand comes to my mind. Napoleon told Talleyrand, I think the constitution must be brief and precise. No, my lord, says Talleyrand, it should be long and ambiguous. Sometimes, yes, ambiguity helps you. And perhaps we have to develop something outside the written constitution. The British have done it. Whatever is in written form, that doesn't count much. What have they practiced? What have they developed? Let us come to one precise thing and then I will close. You have heard of this Copenhagen Agreement or some other treaties, WTO treaty 1994, which Pranab signed and P.V. Narasimharaja Garu was Prime Minister 1994, then WTO, and now maybe Copenhagen, or a little while ago, last year, India-America Civil Nuclear Deal. It's a treaty. We have kicked up a lot of dust in our country on this matter, that Government of India sends one representative, maybe Jairam Ramesh or maybe Pranab Mukherjee or somebody, Kamal Nath, they sign on behalf of the whole of India international agreements or treaties. And the subject matter of the treaties like WTO 1 or Copenhagen 1, they deal vitally with matters of the states, agriculture, fishery, transportation, fuel, so on and so forth. Now the agricultural ministers, foreign ministers of the states are in a divine ignorance what is happening. Though for form's sake, the central government says we have got consultative process, quote within, consultative process is there. Ministers are asked to give their comments. So you circulate a draft, confidential, ask the chief minister or minister concerned with that subject to give comments. Now that is not made public, the document. And what do our ministers, great educated minds of our Yediyurappa's cabinet? You know who they are? How much education they have? How much knowledge they have? How much experience they have in their respective fields? They are supposed to give comments on a confidential text negotiated internationally. And what do? They ask babus, IAS officers. And IAS officers are very smart. They know what is happening in Delhi, what do they want in Delhi. And they do something and send it. And that's the end of the matter. If you ask the minister next day, what have you sent as your comments? He says, go and ask the secretary. Now, there are 28 states today, and all the 28 states' agriculture ministers today are ignorant of Copenhagen Agreement or its implications, including those who come from the learned Marxist states, Kerala and West Bengal. Forget about BJP walas, they don't know anything. But those people who have know everything, ask them, what is Kerala's position, agriculturists or fishermen? How are their interests sacrificed or protected by Copenhagen Agreement, or going to be? And what happened to the WTO agreement? Farmers' interests, they are shouting. Our opposition leaders say, Yediyurappa must resign, must resign, must resign every day. But what were they doing? When they were in power, when WTO agreement was signed, what were the responses of our eminent ministers, chief ministers, opposition leaders? Nothing. And in the constitution, interestingly, and today I am leaving for Calicut, there is a conference tomorrow and day after, international conference on international treaties, parliament and federalism. This is the title of that seminar. And because of that I had to study and prepare a paper. I found in the Indian Constitution, Article 246, etc., giving the list of powers between the centers and the states, they make a division. And this is what central parliament or union government has got subjects to operate or to make laws on. And then it's okay, not much quarrel on that. Union list, concurrent list and state list is adopted. And then in the union list of powers or subjects, item number 12 and item number 13, 14, they deal with foreign policy, international agreements, treaties, etc. And then Article 253 in our constitution is a little astounding. It says, in order to implement, actually they have used a little confusing phrase, implementing of, that's how it is written, not implementing of any international treaty, agreement or conference, international conference or international body. That is the special jurisdiction of the central parliament, union parliament, to implement any one of these treaties, agreements, conference recommendations or bodies, international bodies recommendations, the Union Parliament can make law irrespective of the matter whether they fall under the state jurisdiction. You get the point? Whether it's farmer's interest or fisherman's interest or poor man's interest, whatever it is, if they fall within the state jurisdiction, even then the Union Parliament has got powers, extraordinary power under Article 253 to make laws applicable throughout India or part of India, notwithstanding the fact that some of those subjects fall within the jurisdiction of the states. And if you ask question, the chief would answer the Constituent Assembly, well, this is so in the Westminster model. It is learned in England. So you sit down, don't ask further question. It was passed. And today, you now, as I was telling you, Copenhagen thing is not discussed in Bangalore, in Mumbai, or Bhopal, or in Chennai. All this is done in only Copenhagen, or in New Delhi, or in some debates or seminars conducted elsewhere. But our ministers and chief ministers are supremely ignorant, and they are not reacted, and they are not involved in the process. In America, a tradition has been always that President of America invites important leading members from the opposition party from the Senate. If he is a Democratic president, he invites Republican senators. And not only Republican, sometimes Democratic also. So he invites bipartisan members or two-party representing members to be part of the delegation which negotiates any international treaty or agreement. Woodrow Wilson didn't do that, and he paid a heavy price for that. F.D. Roosevelt did that. He always said, invite that man, what was his name? Remember something. Invite him. So he gives his wisdom, experience, and also his opposition is muted when it comes to ratification by the Senate. He was also there. In England, a minister signs an international treaty or agreement, and that text of the agreement is tabled on the put on parliamentary table for 3 weeks, after which the cabinet ratifies that. And once it is ratified by the cabinet, that's the end of the matter in England. At least 3 weeks, the text of the treaty is made known to the members of the parliament, and you can generate a discussion and opposition if you want. And also additionally, always, whatever the party in power, whosoever is the prime minister, he makes it a point to consult the leader of the opposition and take him into confidence on all important matters, domestic or international. That is the bonhomie or the tradition in England. Now come, sir, here in the Constituent Assembly of India, what model did you follow? You have written here in Article 253, Parliament is all in all. Any international treaty, agreement or conference, international conference or any body, international, whatever its recommendations, accepted by the government of India without telling the parliament what exactly is the text of it, and parliament has no power to ratify or reject. That is what happened to India-America civil nuclear deal. Parliament may carry on debate. Yes, carry on the debate, but you cannot reject. You cannot ratify. Is this Westminster model? Was the leader taken into confidence? Or was it American model, where the opposition party members are made part of the delegation to negotiate those treaties or agreements? No. So when you have a great man as prime minister or a great woman as prime minister, you don't care for the etiquette or protocol or decency or nicety or the general culture followed in America or in Britain. We have our own distinguished culture. Raja, what he says, what he does must be applauded and not questioned. And don't probe the matter, even academically, impartially. No, you must take it down as it is given and worship it. This is the I'm sorry, some of you might be disappointed or disturbed by my observations, but my intention was to disturb you, not to send you back very happy. You must go back and ask questions. Is this the way to draft the constitution of our country? You think about it. Thank you.
ಪಾಟೀಲ್ ಅವರು ಒಳ್ಳೆ ವಿಶ್ಲೇಷಣಾತ್ಮಕವಾಗಿ ವಸ್ತುನಿಷ್ಠವಾಗಿ ಮಾಹಿತಿಯ ಆಧಾರದ ಮೇಲೆ ತುಂಬ ಒಳನೋಟಗಳನ್ನು ನಮಗೆ ಕೊಟ್ಟಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಇದು ಯಾವುದು ಒಂದು ಪಕ್ಷ ಅಥವಾ 2.5 ಜನದ ನಾಯಕತ್ವಕ್ಕೆ ಎಲ್ಲವನ್ನು ವಹಿಸಿದರೆ ಏನೇನಾಗಬಹುದೋ ಅದೆಲ್ಲ ಆಗಿದೆ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನು ಅವರು ಉದಾಹರಣೆಗಳ ಮೂಲಕ ತಿಳಿಸಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ರಚನಾ ಸಭೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಇದ್ದವರೆಲ್ಲನೂ ಮೇಧಾವಿಗಳು, ಲಬ್ಧ ಪ್ರತಿಷ್ಠರು, ನಮ್ಮವರೇ ಆದ ನ್ಯಾಪ್ತಿ ಮಾಧವರಾಯರಿದ್ದರು, ಅಲ್ಲಾಡಿ ಕೃಷ್ಣಸಾಮಯ್ಯರಿದ್ದರು, ಟಿ ಕೃಷ್ಣಮಾಚಾರಿ ಇದ್ದರು, ಎಲ್ಲರೂ ಇದ್ದರು. ಆದರೂ ಇದು ಪರಿಣಾಮ ಸ್ವರೂಪ ಏನಾಯಿತು ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನು ಬಹಳ ಸ್ವಾರಸ್ಯಕರವಾಗಿ, ವಿಷಾದಕರವಾಗಿ ಪ್ರೊಫೆಸರ್ ಪಾಟೀಲ್ ಅವರು ನಮಗೆ ವಿವರಿಸಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಕೆಲವು ಸಲ ಕಾನ್ಸ್ಟಿಟ್ಯೂಷನ್ ಏನದು 1935 ಆ್ಯಕ್ಟನ್ನು ಎಲ್ಲ ತಗೊಂಡು ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಸೇರಿಸಿದ ಅದಿರಬಹುದು. ಅದು 1935 ಆ್ಯಕ್ಟನ್ನು ಅವರು ಪುನರಾವೃತ್ತ ಮಾಡಿಬಿಟ್ರು ಅನ್ನೋದು ಅಷ್ಟೇ ಟೀಕೆ ವಿಷಯ ಅಲ್ಲ. ಮತ್ತು ಅವರು ಹೇಳಿದಾಗೆ 35 ಆ್ಯಕ್ಟ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ಎಷ್ಟೋ ಗುಣಾಂಶಗಳು ಇದ್ದವು. ಆದರೆ ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಅಂಬೇಡ್ಕರ್ ಕೊಟ್ಟ ಸಮರ್ಥನೆ 48 ನವೆಂಬರ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಕಾನ್ಸ್ಟಿಟ್ಯೂಂಟ್ ಅಸೆಂಬ್ಲಿಲಿ ನೋಡಿ, ಕಾನ್ಸ್ಟಿಟ್ಯೂಷನ್ ಮೇಕಿಂಗಿಗೆ ಇಟ್ ಆಲ್ರೆಡಿ ಹ್ಯಾಸ್ ಎ ಹಿಸ್ಟ್ರಿ ಆಫ್ 100 years. 100 ವರ್ಷಗಳಿಂದ ಹಲವಾರು ದೇಶಗಳು ಸಂವಿಧಾನಗಳನ್ನು ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಬಂದಿವೆ. ಆ ಆಧಾರದ ಮೇಲೆ ನಾವೂ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಎಕ್ಸರ್ಸೈಸ್ ನಡೆಸಿದ್ದೇವೆ. ಯಾವುದೇ ಒಂದು ದೇಶದ ಸಂವಿಧಾನ ಅಂದರೆ ಕೆಲವಾರು ಸಂಗತಿಗಳು, ಕೆಲವಾರು ಇದು ಇರಲೇಬೇಕಾಗತ್ತೆ. ಇವುಗಳ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಎಲ್ಲ ಏನು ಮತ್ತೆ ವಿವಾದವಾಗಲಿ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆಯಾಗಲಿ ಇರೋದು ಸಾಧ್ಯ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಹೀಗಾಗಿ ಒಂದು ಸಾಮಾನ್ಯ ಸಂವಿಧಾನ ರಚನೆಗೆ ಒಂದು ಸೂತ್ರ ಈಗಾಗಲೇ ಸಿದ್ಧವಾಗಿದೆ, ಅದರ ಪ್ರಕಾರ ನಾವು ಮಾಡಿದ್ದೀವಿ ಇತ್ಯಾದಿಯಾಗೆಲ್ಲ ಅವರು ಹೇಳಿದರು. ಮತ್ತು ಸಂವಿಧಾನದ ಒಟ್ಟಾರೆ ಸ್ವರೂಪ ಕುರಿತು ಅಂಬೇಡ್ಕರ್ ಅನೇಕ ಸಂದರ್ಭಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಹೇಳಿದ್ದುಂಟು. ಇದು ಐ ಫೀಲ್ ದಟ್ ದಿ ಕಾನ್ಸ್ಟಿಟ್ಯೂಷನ್ ಈಸ್ ವರ್ಕಬಲ್. ಮತ್ತು ಆಗಿನ ಉದ್ದೇಶ ಇದ್ದದ್ದೂ ಅಷ್ಟೇ. ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ಫ್ಲೆಕ್ಸಿಬಿಲಿಟಿನೂ ಇದೆ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಇಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಸ್ಟ್ರಾಂಗ್ ಎನಫ್ ಟು ವಿತ್ ಸ್ಟ್ಯಾಂಡ್ ಆನ್ ಸ್ಲಾಟ್ಸ್. ಆದರೆ ನಾವು ಅದನ್ನು ನಡೆಸೋರು ಯಾವ ಮಟ್ಟದ ಜನ ಇರ್ತಾರೆ ಅದರ ಮೇಲೆ ಇದು ಅವಲಂಬಿತವಾಗಿರುತ್ತೆ. ಒಂದು ವೇಳೆ ಅದು ವಿಫಲವಾದರೆ ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಕಾರಣ ನಾವು ಸಂವಿಧಾನ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಬೇಕಾದ್ದಿಲ್ಲ, ಅದನ್ನು ನಡೆಸಿದ ಜನರ ಗುಣಮಟ್ಟ ಹಾಗಿತ್ತು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಬೇಕಾಗತ್ತೆ ಅಂತ ಅಂಬೇಡ್ಕರು ಹೇಳಿದ್ದುಂಟು. ಮತ್ತು ಅವರು ಅನೇಕ ಸಂದರ್ಭಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಅದನ್ನೇ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು. ಎಷ್ಟೇ ಒಳ್ಳೆಯ ಸಂವಿಧಾನ ಕೊಟ್ಟರು ಅದನ್ನು ನಡೆಸೋರು ಕಳಪೆ ಜನ ಆದರೆ ಸಮಸ್ಯೆಗಳು ಇದ್ದೇ ಇರುತ್ತವೆ ಅಂತ. ಇಷ್ಟಾಗಿ ಸಂವಿಧಾನದ ಸ್ವರೂಪದಲ್ಲಿಯೇ ಅನೇಕ ದೋಷಗಳಿರೋದು ಕೂಡ ಉಂಟು. ಕೆಲವು ಅಂಶಗಳನ್ನು ಪ್ರೊಫೆಸರ್ ಪಾಟೀಲ್ ಅವರು ಹೇಳಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಆದರೆ ಎಲ್ಲಕ್ಕಿಂತ ಮೂಲಭೂತ ಸಮಸ್ಯೆ ಅಂದರೆ ಒಂದು ಸರ್ವಕಾಲಕ್ಕೂ ಇರಬೇಕಾದ ಸಂವಿಧಾನ ರಚನೆಯಂಥ ಮುಖ್ಯವಾದ ಕೆಲಸವನ್ನು ಕೆಲವೇ ಕೈಗಳಿಗೆ ವಹಿಸಿ ಉಳಿದವರು ಸಿಪಾಯಿನಾಗಿ ಉಳಿದು ಬಿಟ್ಟಿದ್ದು. ಇದು ದಟ್ ಈಸ್ ದಿ ಪ್ರೈಸ್ ವಿ ಪೇ ಫಾರ್ ಹೀರೋ ವರ್ಷಿಪ್. ಈ ವ್ಯಕ್ತಿ ಪೂಜೆಗೆ ಕೊಟ್ಟಿರುವ ಬೆಲೆ ಅಂಥದ್ದು. ಅದರಿಂದ ಈ ವ್ಯಕ್ತಿ ಪೂಜೆಯ ಅಭ್ಯಾಸದಿಂದ ಹೊರಗೆ ಬಂದು ಹೊರತು ಇಂಥ ಸಮಸ್ಯೆಗಳಿಗೆ ಅಂತಿಮ ಪರಿಹಾರ ಸಿಗೋದಿಲ್ಲ. ಏನು ಜಾನ್ ಡ್ಯೂಯಿ ಒಂದು ಮಾತು ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದ, ಏನು ವೈಲ್ ಸೈಂಟ್ಸ್ ಆರ್ ಎಂಗೇಜ್ಡ್ ಇನ್ ಇಂಟ್ರಾಸ್ಪೆಕ್ಷನ್, ಬರ್ಲಿ ಸಿನ್ನರ್ಸ್ ರನ್ ದಿ ವರ್ಲ್ಡ್. ಸೊ ಈ ಸಂತರೆಲ್ಲ ದೇ ಆರ್ ಬ್ಯುಸಿ ಇಂಟ್ರಾಸ್ಪೆಕ್ಟಿಂಗ್, ಸೊ ನ್ಯಾಚುರಲಿ ಸಿನ್ನರ್ಸ್ ರನ್ ದಿ ವರ್ಲ್ಡ್. ನಮ್ಮಲ್ಲಿ ಆಗಿರೋದು ಅದೇ ಸಮಾಚಾರ. ಇದನ್ನು ಪ್ರೊಫೆಸರ್ ಪಾಟೀಲ್ ಅವರು ಅನೇಕ ಉದಾಹರಣೆಗಳ ಜೊತೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಹೇಳಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಅವರಿಗೆ ತಮ್ಮೆಲ್ಲರ ಪರವಾಗಿ ಹಾಗೂ ಗೋಖಲೆ ಸಂಸ್ಥೆಯ ಪರವಾಗಿ ಕೃತಜ್ಞತೆಯನ್ನು ಸಲ್ಲಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೇನೆ. ನಮ್ಮ ಕಾರ್ಯಕಾರಿಣಿಯ ಹಿರಿಯ ಸದಸ್ಯರು ಸನ್ಮಾನ್ಯ ಟಿ ವೆಂಕಟಸ್ವಾಮಿಯವರು ಬಂದು ಪ್ರೊಫೆಸರ್ ಪಾಟೀಲ್ ಅವರನ್ನು ಗೌರವ